Welcome to the CG Pro podcast. This is episode 89 with Andy McNamara, who I will introduce in 1 second. If you enjoy the show, please do follow us and join our newsletter. We can find out more about the events that we run at CG Pro. This podcast, we also have the brand new CG Pro show, which is running again next week, broadcast live, the same as this. Come and ask questions, and we hope to see you there. Well, my guest today, Andy, this is a real pleasure to have Andy on the show. I'm going to bring him in and introduce Andy. So, Andy
Hi guys.
McNamara,
Hi Ed. How's it
welcome. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. For our audience, Andy is generative AI lead at CineSight, but going back through his amazing career in visual effects and computer graphics, and as I clear my throat, this is a live broadcast. Um, his career spans a good amount of change that we've seen going through a few decades of computer graphics since the beginning of when it became popular, and really, it's a real honor to have you on the show today, Andy. Andy was also my first teacher in visual effects when I went to Escape. Um, I had a couple of instructors at Escape, and Andy was the first one. He made a huge impact on my personal career, and then being able to have to have you back today is a real privilege. And you're a pioneer, and you always have been. And it's a pleasure to have you here and to be able to thank you live for the impact that you've had on my life as well.
Wow, thanks a lot, Ed. That's really nice of you to say. I mean,
It's true.
We did an awful lot of stuff in those days of sort of like training people through Escape, and I think, as we said a while ago, I think it was an amazing time back. I think it was the early 2000s. I think when we were doing that kind of stuff, mid 2000s, and it was still sort of like huge amounts of potential with the industry. But it was great to have you on board, Ed. You were a brilliant student. There we go.
Thank you so much. I mean, I now running a school, I understand the multiplier effect that you can have as a teacher. It's I think one of the noblest professions out there, to be able to pass on wisdom to the next generation of people getting in, which is now a lot of what I'm involved in. 20 years beyond that point when I was at Escape, but the multiplier, the triple multiplier effect that you've had, being able to teach people who've then gone on and taught more people and create schools even. You've had a big impact on the world.
Wow, that's a big thing to say. No, I mean it's just trying to pass on your knowledge, and I think as you go through your career, I mean, I'm getting on a bit now, really. I mean, I've been doing this about 35 years, see massive amounts of change, and I think you want to give back something to the industry as well in terms of mentoring and that kind of stuff. So it's a pleasure to come on and maybe say a bit about how the history of CGI has gone over the last 35 years and where we are now. Perhaps maybe that's something we could talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. I know that your journey started professionally anyway at IBM, and then moved through Alias and through a whole lot of the visual effects industry. But how did you was there some early impressions that you got that took you in a direction that kind of led to that opportunity?
It was really weird, actually. I mean, if you can imagine a time before CGI and visual effects courses, that's what we were talking about, sort of like in the 80s and early 90s is when I sort of first started doing this kind of properly. I mean, I was born as a bit of a tinkerer on things like the Commodore Amiga back in the sort of mid to late 80s. And that sort of like inspired me to look further afield, looking where CGI was going to go in the future. And yet again, when I went to uni, there was no courses that you could learn any of this stuff. It wasn't even a kind of thing that people did. There was very small pockets of individuals who were doing, CGI or computer animation, as it was called back then. So there wasn't an awful lot of opportunity. So most people gravitated either via standard graphic design or arts courses, or in my end, I started off as a bit of a nerd doing computer science and electronic engineering, but I specialized in what was then called computer graphics. I did software engineering and sort of a bit of AI as well, which is one of the first, was a module on the course. So
before it was cool.
Before it was cool. I mean, it was in those days, it was really rudimentary. You were just typing in a whole bunch of lines of code in order to, talk about, train it to do different things, but it was really, really rudimentary. But I was really lucky because my first job was I was an industrial trainee at IBM in R&D in a place in Winchester in England, and we had this amazing.
Where I lost my first tooth.
In Winchester.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, there we go. There's a synergy there. But in IBM, I was working in a department called the Graphics Applications Research Group. And it was really interesting is that we were, the technology then was at least 10 years ahead about what most commercial CGI systems were doing. It was basically using IBM mainframes, these big, huge 3090 mainframes that were sort of like the size of a kind of, an apartment. And, there's big tape machines that were around that you see in sort of like 1960s kind of science fiction films. And the processing power on this was nuts. And we were doing things like ray trace images at 1K, which were taking like, 24 hours just to do one image. So, you can see the progress from then, how things have moved on. And literally plotting coordinates out on graph paper and enter them into the system, because there was no kind of interactive sort of wireframe kind of interface over the top of it. So you kind of learn all the efficiencies and the tricks of how to use this cool technology. But it was, unfortunately, you had to learn how to code and program and get the most out of it. And it's interesting because even those sensibilities kind of stuck with me even when I was later in my career. You still remember those days of how difficult it was to do anything. So so that was my first foray into it. And what was interesting about that department is that we were working with so a whole range of different researchers. There was people looking at archaeological reconstruction using CGI. I was working in my department with a guy called William Latham, who you might have heard of. He's a computer sculptor. He was the resident artist at IBM doing these amazing kind of wacky kind of CGI animated kind of organic shapes and forms. And he was in a little room doing stuff. And we were just sort of like flitting between different new applications of CGI. And I think it was quite interesting seeing the parallels now between that division where I worked in doing CGI and the stuff, that I'm doing now in the AI space sort of thing. It's very similar, but very different. It's 35 years apart, if that makes sense. Quite interesting.
Yeah. So you went from the research department of IBM into Alias was the next one.
Yeah, I did. I was quite lucky in that after doing a stint at IBM for a while, I realized that, in order to get really good at this stuff, you needed to get back into doing something a bit more creative and artsy with it. So I went back to uni first and I did an MA in what's effectively graphic design. I did that for a few years and I specialized a little bit in animation as well, just to top up that kind of stuff. But I was lucky in that the university I was at was the first one that actually was the first Alias center of excellence in the UK or in Europe. So, I was primed because I knew a bit about computer graphics if I wanted to be part of that team. And we did, it was called the Imaging Research Group, and we did stuff on future of, animation and visual effects and that kind of. So through that, I then, they used to send me around the world as a consultant doing sort of training and consultancy for TV stations and film companies, teaching people how to use what was then called Alias Power Animator, which for those of you not familiar with the history of sort of Maya, was the precursor to Maya sort of thing in terms of a piece of software, really complicated stuff. It had about 52 manuals to learn how to use it and stuff like that. But we used to go around the world just training people up on how to use that tool. It was really good fun. And South Africa was my main kind of place I used to go and train people. So, that's how I got into sort of commercial kind of training, and you become, sort of like a bit of an expert on how to get people up to speed quickly. As you said, Ed, I think those sensibilities work when I, work briefly at Escape doing bits and pieces and training and stuff like that. So you get taught a certain way how to do things, which was pretty cool.
And then after Alias, getting into the visual effects industry.
Yeah, I was fortunate in that, you start getting a lot of contacts by doing, training and consultancy and that kind of thing. And I had some contacts at the BBC, and they were in the process of expanding and setting up a much larger computer graphics department to service everything from sort of like BBC graphic design, which is pretty legendary. And I was attached to a department called the Video Effects Workshop, which has a long history. For those of you who are Doctor Who nerds, which I'm sure there might be a few on the listening. I mean, it was sort of like one of the first departments that was doing all the special effects for Doctor Who. So I was trained up by the original guys in the 60s and 70s who were doing all the effects for that.
Wow.
Now, obviously, during that period, it was sort of, they were quite rudimentary, but, you learn a lot of tricks on how to, how to cut corners and what to look for. And, really sort of help sort of fine tune your critical eye of looking at things. And I was really lucky. I was taught by those guys pretty well. So that was a great opportunity, and then worked on everything really. It was from, as I said, channel idents all the way through to, dramas, documentaries, the whole range of things. And then we did a lot of work with BBC at an Imagineering department, which are looking at like the next generation of kind of filmmaking and TV programming and stuff. And they were looking at computer graphics and all that kind of stuff. So exciting time, and learned an awful lot about how to do things really quickly but also, efficiently, because television is quite an interesting sort of learning and experience, really, if you're trying to learn a lot of things and sort of develop your skills. And I was pretty much a generalist during those days, but you learn a lot about how to do lots of things, and I think that's a really good skill at relatively early in your career, I think, to learn those kind of things.
Right. Yeah, the different workflows, TV versus film versus commercials. There's a lot of difference between them. If you're using the same tools, you're doing it in very different ways. And I know it's evolved a bit over the years too, but it tend to get like faster turnaround in TV and commercials, and have to like figure out interesting ways of solving problems much quicker.
I think so, and I often get asked by students who are coming out, and they say, look, at a college, and they say, what should I do? Should I specialize as a lighter or an astronaut modeler or stuff like this? And I still say it cannot be a bad thing to learn a little bit of those different skills into the whole process, certainly early in your career. And I think eventually, I ended up becoming a CG supervisor, a VFX supervisor. And certainly as a CG supervisor, understanding all the different disciplines, it was a lot easier for me to understand what the roles were, because I'd done them all as part of, to a degree, as a generalist. So it's quite a good training ground if you ever get an opportunity to be a generalist. You learn an awful lot about a lot of things, which is good.
What do you think makes a good generalist?
I think it's a mixture of two things, or three things actually. I think one of them is you've got to have good technical chops on the box. I think you've got to be able to learn things pretty quick, because you can't know everything being a generalist. I think you've got to have a good critical creative eye. So if somebody asks you questions about what do you think, or how can you improve this shot, or have you got any ideas, I think that's what you often are, especially in commercials still. And And I think the other one that's that's different as well, or useful, is having great communication skills. I think I do wonder sometimes, in sort of these big, huge feature film pipelines, some of that comm stuff is still really important. Certainly, the higher up you go in your career, as a generalist, working very closely directly with clients. That was a really good skill I learned very early, how to communicate and explain concepts and stuff easily. So I think those three things are what makes a good generalist. Certainly, if anyone's interested in doing commercials, that's really important, I think.
Right. Yeah, you end up being in that position where well, you don't know what position you're going to be in, right? One day you could be doing something completely brand new you've never done before. The next day you could be with a client. Next day you might be leading a project and you've never done that before, and all of a sudden you're doing it.
And literally, you could walk in one day. I mean, it happened all the time when I was doing commercials. Um, the client would come in, or the ad agency would come in, and they hadn't had a clue. And you have to, you drive the meeting really to say, have you thought of doing this way or that way? And it's a great skill. It's a great skill to have. And I think as you go through your career, certainly get up to VFX sort of leveling in film, and streaming stuff. I think that those are really, really useful skills to develop. I think that creative, critical eye. So spelling commercials is always a good thing, I think, for people in their careers.
Cool. Yeah, it's and it's evolving, I'm sure, as the technology changes. We're having to adapt faster and faster now. Got one piece of feedback from the audience saying that your microphone is a little bit low.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can. Maybe I should get closer to it.
That'll probably help.
Tell
us.
Sorry,
There we go.
guys. Let me see if I can turn this up.
Sounds a little better to me. Let us know in the stream if that's better.
Is that better? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Cool.
I think being closer helps.
You'll get a big head. That's the difference. Now I'll have to move a bit to the thingy. Cool. Yeah. So those are two early career highlights, I suppose. And then I think I did spelling commercials for a while. I did a few heads of CG kind of roles, and those are quite interesting. So you learn different skills as well in those kind of roles. I mean, everyone thinks head of CG is you have to know everything. You have to know everything about Maya and Houdini, and but it isn't really. It becomes you don't know everything, but you're the person who knows how to facilitate things and to actually make sensible workflow decisions on how best to do stuff. And I think that's another step up from being like a senior artist or a CG supervisor. I think head of CG role is another different set of skills that you develop into that.
Yeah, what's it like? Tell us what an average day of a head of CG is like.
It could be anything. I think you do a lot. You're that conduit between, let's say, the show. I mean, obviously, I was head of CG at CineSite for 3 years until I moved into this newer. But I've done it in other companies, and they're very different how heads of CG kind of work. Sometimes it's you're the go-to guy between management and the floor. You're also who has to deal with production problems. You'll often, in some roles, you'll get hiked in to work out workflows and some more heavy technical stuff. It's mentoring. It's trying to get people up to a certain level. Your agony aunt when things are going wrong. People are in tears because they can't hit their schedule. You're working closely with production in order to try and make sense of their nut schedule. So yet again, these are different skills, and I think looking back this evening before I came on here, I was trying to work out the different skill patterns that went through all this, through the career, and they evolve over time. And I think some people like being an artist, or some people like doing certain types of work, but they're all different, rewarding and points of your career. And I think the older you get as well, you kind of gravitate to certain things, and I think there's an interesting thing that happens when you get to over 30 as well as an artist. sometimes it's your desire not to want to stay until 2 in the morning or whatever, fixing things, because you've got a wife and kids, and your priorities change, and the things become that were interesting in the early stages of your career are less interesting as you in later stages of career. So it's something to think about, really.
It's a really good point. And during my career, which is a mere 20 years, I've had moments where I've definitely noticed shifts, and also one moment where I felt like my passion dropped, and I eventually worked out it was because I wasn't pushing myself as much.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on kind of keeping the passion alive for a longer career?
Yeah, I think the way to do it is to not stay in one place for too long. I think if, I mean, this is my opinion, this isn't sort of like an industry sort of, the mantra of how you do it. I think you learn a lot by flitting between companies and staying for maybe 3 or 4 years and then going off and learning something else in a different company. I think that gives you slightly different focus, and even doing different sorts of work. As I said, I started off doing broadcast and television and stuff like that, moving to commercials. I've done immersive projects, which are really exciting. Really, I still do those. To film work, animation kind of projects. I've even done game cinematics for a spell. But I think every time you flip between a different discipline, all the stuff that you've learned beforehand, you'll find things are directly relevant, and it turns you into a slightly different beast every time you move to a different company. I think you learn as you go a whole bunch of different skills, and I think that's what keeps you refreshed, really. Different people, different ways of doing things, different approaches, that kind of stuff is really, really exciting, really, and it keeps you interested, I suspect. So you never stop learning.
Don't get too comfortable, basically.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they like staying at one place for a long time, and I've seen it a lot. I just think sometimes you've just got to get out of your comfort zone and do something that's a little bit different somewhere else. I think it's something completely alternative for what you do.
There's a great way to kind of ensure that you will be uncomfortable is to go somewhere else. There are probably ways to do it and stay at the same place, just pushing yourself into a different area or making things different in other ways.
I think the irony is that we as CG artists or visual effects artists, we develop all these amazing skills in our career, and we it's a bit like you hear that everyone's got a book inside them or a novel inside them. Well, I think all visual effects and CG artists have a film inside them that they want to make, and they never have the time because they're always too busy at work and too knackered when they finish. So maybe that's another thing. Take some time out and do something creative that's a little bit different from the day job, really. No, it's another thing.
Personal project here and there.
Yeah,
it's hard to do it all the time, right? But like
really
every now and again.
If you're coming off crunch and you're tired and exhausted and your wife and kids are shouting at you, it's the last thing you really want to do is a creative project. But look, it's healthy to do stuff like that, I think.
Yeah, I think those are good places to experiment and try things where they're not under a crunch or a forced kind of schedule.
The dreaded crunch.
The dreaded crunch. But sometimes crunch has been some of my favorite times. It's weird. Like some of the most stressful and hardest times I've had have been the ones where I've got the most growth, or I've felt so satisfied afterwards. It's interesting how that goes.
It's exactly right, and I think I'm sure you've been on projects or shows where you come off the end of it, you never want to see it again, and you've got to almost have 3 or 4 months away from it, and you come back and you go, actually, that wasn't as shit as I thought it was, and because you're too close to it. And I think this is a good thing to be objective, isn't it, by taking some space away from what you've been doing. And it's really hard when you're doing sort of 7-day weeks and working till midnight every night. It's really difficult.
It is, yeah. Usually it doesn't last forever, but when you're in the middle of it, you have to find interesting ways to take care of yourself. And do you have any kind of practices for making sure you look after the other things in life other than computer graphics?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that I play music. I do all sorts of stuff in my spare time like that. And I think you'd be surprised how many musicians there are in the visual effects studios around the world who use that as a bit of an escape. And I think there is a parallelism between music and this kind of stuff. I think I'd be really surprised that there's nobody on this call who's listening who hasn't a similar kind of pastimes. But it's good to do something completely different. I think we all do things, try and do something artistic, but I think it's you need to think, what is it that is a little bit divorced away from the day job to allow you to recharge, whatever that is.
Yeah, change is as good as a rest, as they say.
Exactly.
I already turned one hobby into a career, and I'm trying not to do that with music over the years, even though there have been opportunities.
I remember your background was a VJ back in the day. So do you keep that up still?
Yeah, every now and again. Yeah, I mean, like you, I guess we do project work, and sometimes that falls into the immersive bucket. Or doing show. We just did some concert visuals for a well-known artist recently, and it was fun. The work was more fun than who it was for, but it was great. It was really, really nice to be able to do that. To be able to make things is always fun, and having little projects where you can know that they're going out for some different use case other than a film. Films are very, very, very has very tight parameters sometimes, whereas some of the other things like music videos and visuals and immersive can have more space to be creative in. Something I've always loved over the years is that those shorter form things as well as the longer form, because those are the times where I've ended up being, oh, I'm a director of a commercial all of a sudden. How did that happen? And just because it was the right environment for that to appear, and you get to be creative in a whole different way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think having those kind of side projects, side hustles, certainly in these difficult times, can only be a good thing, because I think there's more opportunities now to find outlets if you are doing short films and things like that, isn't it? Really, I think there are so many ways of getting your work out there than there was, let's say, 20 years ago, and hopefully more in the future as well. So who knows?
One of the things that really caught my eye in the last couple of years that you worked on was the short film with the eggs, and it was so cool. It was like I think maybe still even one of the best AI shorts that I've seen, because it was brilliant. It was a brilliant idea, and I know it was an idea you had for a really long time and wanted to make. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
I mean, hopefully I'm not going to have eggs thrown at me for talking about AI on this.
Only digital ones.
Only digital ones. That's good. That's good. So I think my journey with AI started about 3 years ago. I think I was messing about. I used to do a lot of stuff in my spare time with it wasn't sort of, how would you call it, creative coding and stuff like that. And there was a whole bunch of things like processing. Some of you may know
I used to use that. Yeah,
coding environment and stuff. And there was a few channels online. And then I saw somebody posted something using a tool called disco diffusion, which is just like an antique now in AI terms. But I didn't know it was AI at the time. I just couldn't work out with my CGI and VFX head how they do it. I couldn't even think how, sort of blew my brains a bit, really. And if you think about it, it was just like this swirling kind of pattern that was forming and all the rest of it. And I thought that this is just nuts. So I delved into it and downloaded it. And it was some open source software sort of thing running on Google Colab, which is like an AI platform. And literally, I remember playing it one evening, and I had a bit of an epiphany, and I realized then the world was about to change. And I think anyone who's gone through that kind of AI journey, I mean, it's a whole bunch of things at the moment with AI, isn't it? But I think there's a moment you get to a point where you think, actually, I can really see where this is going, and I can see what the potential is. And I wasn't even thinking negatively at the time about the implications, all sorts of really important things to discuss around that. So anyway, cut long story short, started getting very excited about what the potential was, how you could mix kind of CGI and this kind of new medium together, sort of thing. And I got fortunately I got on the beta program when Runway, the big AI company, was quite early in its kind of inception. It's probably only been going about 2 years, and they'd had this new tool called Gen 2, and that sort of blew my mind as well. I did some short films that did quite well. And then the one you saw, Ed, was sort of like Gen 3. I got early access to that, and that could, and there's a lot of short films that I really wanted to make, but I couldn't because A, I didn't have the time to do them, and B, I'd be honest, I didn't have perhaps some of the technical knowledge in order to be able to realize them quite quickly. And one of them was this idea, and I started off when I was learning Houdini. Basically, a simple egg that's falling and it cracks on the floor, and something different happens unexpectedly. And the whole idea of this thing was called unexpected outcomes. So it's basically multiple eggs falling, they shatter, and strange things happen, like fire comes out of them or something like that, or the egg bounces or does something weird. And the whole idea is I was going to use it as a bit of a vehicle to learn Houdini really sort of precisely and all the rest of it. And this was about 10-15 years ago. And I managed to do the first setup of this thing, and it took me about 6-7 weeks, and it was just like, oh Christ. And that this whole idea of making a film around that was sort of abandoned. So anyway, so Gen 3 came out, and yet again, it's one of these magical things where you've got this idea. The whole idea of using Houdini is as a technical exercise is great, but when you really just want to experiment and riff on some ideas very, very quickly and produce something, I think this is where AI becomes quite strong at sort of helping iterate and get your creative juices flowing and just to try things out. And I think that's where that film came out of. Really, it was and also sympathetically, the music as well works with the piece. It's brilliant. Maybe we can put a link somewhere at some point. If
yeah, definitely, we'll share it for sure.
But it's won a few awards, and I didn't think anything at the time. But it'd been so long in its inception, but I'd never have finished that project. It would have taken me like 2 years in Houdini if I was going to do it stuff. But I managed to get the gist or the essence of what that film was about just by using generative tools and using, sensibilities over 20-30 years of being able to sort of like direct and construct sequences. So it wasn't just typing in prompts and hoping for the best. I knew exactly the sort of results that I wanted. And I think this is the difference, where these tools allow you to sort of like take an idea and, if you've come from an art and design background or a visual effects background, I think you really will get the most out of them, because I think it allows you to amplify what's already there in terms of your skill sets. But that's my opinion. But yeah.
I think it's important to say, because there's a lot of debate going on around, and you mentioned some of the debates in terms of the copyright, and the two biggest issues that I've been saying for a while that it has is copyright and control. And as an artist, we're kind of like the ultimate control freaks. We want exactly what we want, and these tools are beginning to give us bits of that, but not the type of control that you have in visual effects. I love the thing that you said. The reason for you doing it is you had this idea a long time ago and tried it and couldn't realize it for a number of reasons. I've had the same experience, for like, I really want to do this thing and I can't because I don't have a budget to pay people, or I don't have enough favor points in my friend group currently, or like I don't have the time personally or all the skills personally. But it's I love the genesis of it in that sense. It was an idea that would not have been allowed out were it not for this new advance.
Yeah, exactly. And I think all of us, I mean, I'm sure there's people on this call who've started pet projects, and they just get abandoned. There's thousands languishing on hard drives around the world, I'm sure, in terms of
I have many
that never go anywhere, but it does give you the opportunity to get further with them. I'm not saying that it's the solution to everything. But it certainly was eye-opening to see how far you could move things.
And it's the results great too. Like the the reason for me in that is, yes, the tool, but it's really the idea, the idea and the sub ideas within that idea, because those are what you've already expressed as being the artist sensibility and the ideation, the creativity. Is not just about the tool set that you're using, or
And
it's
I think as well, going back to the beginning of this podcast, when I was talking about when I was at IBM and the mid to late 80s, I think this is where we are with the AI tools at the moment. It's like you're talking pre-Pixar, you're talking pre-Toy Story, you're talking nobody was really doing narrative things with CGI before sort of like 92, 93. I mean, they did Luxor Junior, which is obviously around about 80, 88, something like 87, 88 perhaps. But, we're at that stage with the tools and technology at the moment. It's so early, six-fingered hands and all that kind of stuff. And it's just about prompts and it's AI slot and that kind of stuff. But these tools will mature and they will develop and they will turn into a rich set of control things that will probably develop hybrid workflows with CGI and comp and all the other disciplines that we see to produce some really incredible stuff in the future. So I'm pretty optimistic how those things will develop, but it's so early. It's very, very similar to mid to late 80s where CGI was, which was awful. It was really crap. You had 2,000, 3,000 polygon limits on models. That's what we're talking. You couldn't have you had about 10 textures per scene and think, there's a whole bunch of things that you couldn't do that would look rubbish by today's standards. But I think that's where we are with AI at the moment, Ed, I think.
And it's interesting too that you mentioned Toy Story and some of the early projects, because those, yes, they do look less sophisticated than some of the stuff today, but some of them still stand up. And some of them, especially if there's a great idea or a great emotion that's being conveyed, or even I was watching a little bit of, a Spielberg documentary that had some of the early Jurassic Park in, and looking at, I watched Jurassic Park not that long ago. That was my breakthrough movie, the movie that made me want to get into it,
Yeah,
I'm sure, for most. And it still holds up. And it was like brilliant because it had just a little bit of CG in it, and it was just in the right spot, and it was still had practical, and it still had, even though it was birthing this new thing, it didn't have too much of it, and it was like done well enough that it does still hold up.
It's great you said that rather than Star Wars, because if I have a 10p or a dollar for every the artist that said they were inspired by Star Wars, I'd be very rich. But I mean, for me, I'm old enough I went to see Star Wars in the cinema with my dad. That's how old I am. But the one that made a difference for me and wanted me to do visual effects was actually Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Doug Trumbull's work, of the model work, and that's outstanding. Still holds up now. And I think from pure storytelling, yet again, another Spielberg film, love him or hate him, he does know how to craft yarn. And that had a huge, profound impact on me. Every time I do one of these kind of things, I always say Trumbull's work on that show was amazing. Amazing work, amazing film. But that's inspired me to go into, yet again, CGI and VFX, I think.
So seeing that you've seen CG basically get born and progress tremendously, and seeing ray tracing go from tape machines and 24 hours for a single frame of 1K up to the point where we now have full frame ray traced 2K, 4K in real time. What has been some of the most surprising shifts that you've seen?
I think real time has been probably one of the most profound things. I think PBR rendering. I think before that, having to fake everything if you were a lighter or doing lighting stuff was a real pain in the ass. And I think actually being able to take HDRIs and those, I think the lighting pipeline on both real time and traditional conventional rendering, I think was the two biggest things that have made a big difference.
It's funny you mentioned that one, because actually when I first got into CG, I thought I was really bad at lighting inherently, because I was doing things that didn't work all the time, and then found out the whole linear thing kicked in, and PBR, and understanding it better, so you could actually put a light in and it wouldn't just crunch straight off. It would actually do what you would hope it would do. Yeah,
it does make lighting a little bit easier, because if you imagine when things like version 1 of Maya, you had none of those tools. You literally had to put an array of point lights, parent them to some sort of dome, and you come up with these amazing kind of rigs that allow you to drive things with ramps and all. Oh my god, those are the days. So it's made lighting a little bit easier, I suspect, with these tools. But yet again, it's a hugely important thing. Anything that affects final pixel and the look of a shot, I mean, lighting's still massively important. You can make a really crap model look great with some amazing lighting and textures. It's the way, it's still the mantra today, really, I think.
Yeah, it has such a huge impact on the emotion of a piece, even if it, as you said, some of the other components don't work.
I mean, humans as well. I think two of the challenges used to be physically accurate water. A whole bunch of papers over the last 20 years that evolved into what we see with the flip stuff in Houdini now, and even human, you could never believe that something like MetaHuman could be as performant as it is inside a real-time engine, doing some really cool stuff, and some of the other Arnold and RenderMan based approaches as well for doing skin and that kind of stuff. Those are the things, sort of like the holy grail back 20-25 years ago, and now they're just standard. I wouldn't say they're push button fire forget stuff, but we've come a long way, and I'm trying to work out, are there any major sort of hurdles now with CGI? I think if you've got time and money, you can do pretty much anything, and I think that's the problem at the moment. There isn't the money to do anything these days with the current industry, I suspect. That's the big challenge.
What's it like right now from your perspective, industry wise?
Well, it's still challenging. I mean, without going over old ground, I'm sure everyone on this call appreciates it's difficult. I think a huge array of different things, going back from post-COVID to the writer strike to streamers and studios not commissioning as much stuff. Even things like CGI potentially not being as in vogue as it used to be. It's a commodity now. It's a thing that people have in shows. Every shot is now touched as a visual effects shot. Really, everything gets manipulated. So there's a lot of challenges, and CineSite's no different from everyone else. We're all hoping for better times in 26. I think it's difficult for young people coming into the industry. I think those junior roles that used to be able to train people up is significantly less at the moment due to the downsizing of crews and things. But we've got to be hopeful to the future and what's around the corner, and and then looking more broadly about what the visual effect CGI opportunities could possibly be in other different bits of the industry as well. As we said, commercial still there. There's telly, and some of the stuff we're doing at CineSite, and I'm one of the creative directors on the immersive team, doing a whole bunch of stuff that needs sort of like visual effects skill sets and workflows in order to produce at a really high level. And I think that convergence between visual effects and the next generation of immersive experiences is going to be really interesting. And I can pretty much see that a lot of people who did work on features could possibly work on these kinds of shows as well, these kind of projects. So I think looking more broader away from just simply film-based stuff, I think is really important.
Yeah, I've had several jobs over the years. Through my last job was with a car company, of all things, a race car championship. Same skill sets, building things in Houdini, doing world building, still being creative, and I think it's useful to know that some people don't necessarily think it's either even there, or if they do, that they shouldn't do it because it's moving away from the thing that they really want. But you can always come back in, and every industry goes through these times. Like real estate in 2008 was a horrendous thing to be in, and yet it came back and was an amazing thing to be in again. So
It's
we
cyclic,
have
isn't
no
it?
idea. Yeah.
It's all cyclic. I mean, there's been about 2 or 3 downturns in my career for a number of different reasons. A lot of it's macroeconomic, things like the credit crunch that affected how studios were spending, the recent stuff. But there is some optimism in the future. I think it will evolve into something that's different, but I think equally as exciting. I think moving forward with visual effects.
Given your perspective on and seeing it kind of be born and see it evolve a lot and change a lot over the years, and then in very recent times seeing this onset of AI, what would you say to two groups of people as to what to focus on right now? One of them being people who are getting into the industry, want to get into the industry, and then also maybe those who are already been in the industry, maybe for a while, and they're also curious about what to do.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because I think there's a lot of experience and expertise that's tied up in the current technologies and workflows and tools. So I completely get it. I think there's one thing that's pretty obvious. Well, I mean, I can talk a bit about the division I'm in at the moment at CineSight, but it's pretty obvious that this AI thing is not going to go away. I think it's going to evolve. It's going to change. It's disruptive technology, and those are the negative things. I think if I was at college, I would certainly start trying to understand and play with some of these technologies to become familiar with what they can and can't do. Because I suspect what's going to happen with visual effects studios, these will become hybrid workflows where we'll be using the best bits of old and new to do more with less effectively in the future. But it will open up a whole different set of creative possibilities. So I think what's going to happen is that the role of a visual effects artist is going to evolve. And I think it's for the better ultimately to allow us to do more cool things. And a lot of stuff that we haven't even contemplated yet where the industry is likely to go. I mean, some of the stuff we're looking at the moment in my generative group is things like real-time generative AI. I mean, that is just a complete brain, makes you completely go, what does that mean for the industry? But you can imagine the next generation of entertainment, if you can render things in real time generatively, and you can put, let's say, some tooling around it to allow creatives to express themselves, maybe with a combination of CGI and other sorts of workflows, you can produce some incredible world building applications which kind of mix sort of games and immersive experiences. And if you can do things in real time, then you can make things interactive. And I think the next generation of tooling around all this are going to be really amazing. Somebody has yet to invent what I would call the Maya of generative AI. Everyone talks about comfy UI and all that kind of stuff. I think it's a transient technology. I think that will evolve into something else. Some other other companies will come out of the woodwork, which will take the best bits of all the things that we currently do in this space and come up with some sort of tool that's we can't even imagine at the moment. So bookmark this. Write to me when I'm in my old folks' home, and you tell me if my premonition was correct.
We'll do a podcast episode from the old folks' home.
And Andy when he's 90 or something like that. But I can see the concerns, and I think there's a hell of a long way to go where things like the legal and the IP copyright stuff, which is hugely important. There's things like data centers and green issues around it. There's a whole bunch of stuff that still needs to be resolved, legislation. But I am optimistic that it will land in some sort of positive place for artists in the future. I really do.
Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, and it's good to think about what things people should focus on. So definitely good to hear in terms of the new tools. How about some sort of some of the traditional tools or pursuits you mentioned already? Having a good eye as an artist, and some of the kind of more fundamentals, and then just, I guess the stuff in the middle.
They're all going to be valid. I mean, things like photography, cinematography, design, art direction, being able to guide these amazing tools so they're not just like, dare I say the word, AI slot that you just press some buttons and out comes something. I think that
there's a lot of that out there. Yeah,
there's a lot of that out there. And I think it is. It's like wallpaper, you just switch off. I switch off when I see a lot of this stuff. But I think there will be a practical application. And in the group that I'm in at the moment, TechX at CineSites, it's a technology exploration group. It's not a production outfit. All we're looking at is what the truth is at the moment in terms of these tools and what they can and can't do. Some of them work, some of them don't. Some of them are rubbish. Some of them show potential for the future. But I think they will ultimately add to the filmmaking process. I mean, nobody wants to do roto indefinitely as part of their career. So all the low-hanging kind of slightly more, less interesting tasks, most VFX artists wouldn't want to do them. So I think that's going to be the first thing that we'll see, some more robust tooling around that will be added. And we're seeing it already in things like Nuke and tools like that at the moment. But there's some optimism. That's what I'm going to say. I can see the challenges and I can see everyone's concerns, but ever hopeful that things will evolve in the right way. But you've just got to keep on top of the change. I mean, I said I started off on one package. I probably learned about 4 or 5 CG tools over the career. But the base principles are exactly the same, and it's the same with the AI stuff. It's just another tool as part of your repertoire of tools, I think. And I think they will evolve into something that's useful eventually. I think
some of those things you mentioned are the timeless ones that persist through every one of those tool sets, from the tape machine through the Houdini to this. An artist's eye and sensibility is something that is nothing to do with any one of those tools.
Exactly. And I think it's taking the best bits as creative people and using them effectively, and let you decide how to use them. Your human in the loop is going to be really important for the better types of work that people will be doing with these tools, I think.
We have a very specific question in the chat here from somebody. Any thoughts on the new WAN?
The new WAN's excellent. WAN 2.2, I believe. Yes, it's incredible. I mean, yet again, I think we're big fans of sort of open source software. We're doing a lot of testing with a lot of these Chinese models just to see what they can do. I think the gap between what we call platform-based stuff, like your runways and your clings and your halo min-maxes and those kind of pickers or whatever, is still ahead. But I think that gap with open source AI models is closing very, very quickly. I think all we need now is an ethical, high quality open source model that can compete. And I think we're in business. And I think that will have a number of ticks for some workflows in the future that everyone can just do some great work in as an open source platform, and obviously, copyright safe as well. That's the holy grail. Whether or not we get there, I don't know yet. But WAN, it's great. Really love it.
There you have it. I think we'll see every week how it progresses, because it's one of the fastest shifts too that I've seen. I mean, used to going to a SIGGRAPH every year and seeing some amount of incremental improvement and more. I'm sure you saw even more of it earlier on at SIGGRAPHs, where there was big revolutionary things coming out more frequently, and then it sort of leveled off a little bit. And there's still improvement, but it's much slower. And now the speed of it is the thing was melting people's eyes.
It's like the first 3 releases of Maya were rapid. The guy who was their head of product said they're on an aggressive technology agenda. That was about 98. And every release, I mean, they would. It sounds ridiculous now, but Maya was released on yearly cycles, you can see some of the AI tools now are like 3 monthly cycles where they do updates, or 2 monthly cycles. So the rate of progress is very, very similar, but a lot faster. And I think you're right. I think that it'll plateau at some point. There'll be it won't be as rapid. But I think we've still got a few more years of these rapid developments still to come with these tools every week.
Yeah.
So really difficult to keep on top of, really.
Yeah, there's definitely the model training route, but then there's potential for other types that are talked about that we aren't seeing yet to emerge, and quantum computing maybe will finally have its day.
It's GPU is the future for a lot of this stuff, obviously, and I think some of the H100s and even more expensive series of that kind of technology will be available on the desktop soon, within the next couple of years for sure. And it's just hugely exciting where that's going to take us. But I think the thing is, it's like it's worth playing with the tools just to understand them. And I wonder if the next few years, as part of a skill set of a visual effects artist, it will be having some awareness of these AI tools and how they can be used as part of a prerequisite to get hired. I'm not sure, but that's my hunch at the moment.
Yeah.
So really trying to understand them, even if you don't like them, is probably not a bad kind of future-proofing thing at the moment, just to appreciate what they can do, at the very least. So.
It seems like doubling down on the fundamentals that are nothing to do with the tool, plus learning the new tools where they're appropriate, seems to be the mix. It's hard as an individual to get it all, but over a longer period of time, you can get really good at things. Over a year, it's incredible how much better you can get if you do half an hour a day on something.
Yeah, exactly. And these things are just tools. That's all. And they're part of a bigger tool set for making beautiful pictures. That's all it is.
What do you think? What would be your maybe hopeful prediction and or possible theory on where this might be going in terms of how the creativity evolves as we're seeing some of these new things? Because we've seen things evolve in computer graphics and provide new ways of doing things. The Jurassic Park moment for me in the cinema was like, whoa, what am I looking at? I've never seen anything like this before. And it inspired me to want to work in it, but it also was like something the world had never seen before. What do you think that this does for creativity?
Going back to your point, because you raised an interesting thing. I personally, I still think those shots that you mentioned, Jurassic Park, still hold up in the same way that if you look at Close Encounters, which I mentioned earlier, or you look at 2001 in Space Odyssey, some of those shots still hold up. I wouldn't say all of them hold up, but the fundamentals is that you had people who had good eyes, who were on top of their game in terms of filmmaking and photography and all that kind of traditional skills, and the level of creativity was not overawed by the technology of the time. And I think that's why those shots, those sequences still stand up. Same with Toy Story. I mean, if you look now, what those guys had to do to animate those characters, and amount of bespoke,
pretty abstract.
Yeah, it's just like but that still stands up. I do wonder, if you look at a lot of the AI stuff that's being generated now, it probably won't be in the same way. But I think we will expect at some point what I would call the Toy Story AI moment, where somebody will crack it as a storytelling medium. And I think that will change perceptions. Because I remember when I started being a CG artist, back in the say doing this professionally, early 90s, let's say, there was a huge backlash against CG guys from traditional model makers and traditional animators. It's the same cycle of negativity, really, that we're finding with AI at the moment. Job displacements and that kind of thing. But going back to your point, I think I think there is a potential it could help develop to allow artists to really realize or amplify a lot more about what their core capabilities are creatively in the long run. I don't think we're there yet by a long way, but I do think I'm optimistic that new art forms or new creative mediums will come out of all this in the future. And I'm quite optimistic. I'm also negative about certain things, but I'm optimistic about how it will affect people in the future.
It's good to be balanced as well. Not very little in life is black and white. Very little is either all good or all bad. But it's interesting as well, because you mentioned the idea of iteration and that being important in the creative process, whether it's engineering or painting. Most of that work, creative work, either technical or aesthetic, is about trying things and iterating. And some of the stuff that I got to witness on movie sets like Lion King or Jungle Book was seeing people play in real time with the stuff that they could only previously have had to sit over the shoulder of an Maya animator and give them some notes and then go away and then have it a quick time sent to them later with, they're like, no, that's not what I meant. But being able to see the thing in the real time was really eye-opening to me. It's why we built CG Pro, really, was just wanting the world to have that, and in this, seeing people doing similar things, being able to see things quicker.
Yeah, I mean also there's the horrible business aspects of visual effects. Boo hiss, we haven't mentioned any of that kind of stuff, but the pressures on studios, especially Citysite, ILM, blah, 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 whatever, it is immense. And I think there's vertical pressure on us to be more efficient and dare I say it, cut costs, do things more faster, cheaper, all that horrible things. And so a lot of the drivers are coming downwards, and I think studios are having to react to what this means in terms of how they change the way they do things. And I think you're going to see a lot of this in the future as well. I think.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, as I say often. We'll
interesting times. Live in interesting times. Once more, Ed. I think.
Yeah, well, it's pretty cool to be able to be alive at a time where things are changing a lot. Because when you're in times when they aren't changing much, boredom tends to creep in for many, and you dream of the times where it was all crazy and things were being shifted around all the time. There's new stuff all the time. You wish for that back, and then when you're in those times, very often you're uncomfortable and you kind of want it to level off a little bit. It's like we're never happy.
Well, it does feel that way. It does feel like the things are changing in the same way that when CGI came in for the first time, it was a new medium. There was a lot of suspicion. There was a lot of opportunities. There was very few people doing it, and it has that vibe about it at the moment. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be a lot more disruptive than that industry, than that technology was.
Yeah, I agree.
But we've got to have some optimism that new roles and new jobs and new creative outlets will spring out of this. It won't just be prompts. And that's the other thing. It's not about prompts. There's a whole bunch. Anyone who's used Comfy, no. I'm sure there's some Comfy UI people on this call. It's a lot more to it than that. And I think it's more akin to doing mind-bending Houdini gymnastics than it is than simply typing in make a cat with a banana coming out his ear kind of thing. Hope for the best.
As my good friend John Brennan said, words are too low resolution as an input. There's with a cat walking on a table, whatever, there's so much interpretation that goes on beyond that. That could be so many different things. Whereas the process we are used to in the visual effects process with that extreme control, where people want 3 wrinkles instead of 2 on the 8-pixel wide shoulder, that's you can't even see in a helicopter behind broken glass and fire, and that much control. When you want that much control, you're never going to get there with just speaking in the way that you can't just talk to your team of visual effects artists and expect what you want to appear. You can't with these either.
Prompts are ambiguous. That's the problem. It's it needs multimodal approaches to control these things. And we have a firm belief that things like video to video are going to be a really important part of this process, that whereby you do, dare I say, not crude, but I think reasonably well-balanced previses of maybe grayscale stuff with some very, very simple shaders, and then you're effectively using the AI stuff as a renderer. And I think this idea of neural rendering is going to be something that's going to be quite important in the future, because it gives you the best bits of CGI of how previs works in terms of composition, blocking, and timing. But it gives you the best bits of what generative tools give you, that you can train things to do specific styles, material definitions and all that kind of stuff. So I do think this is probably the direction of travel for sort of rendering technology over the next 10, 15 years, I suspect. Probably quicker than that.
Yeah.
But it does give you that nice balance between what we know as CG artists, and what the generative tools can do to help support that. Because rendering is nuts expensive as a process. If there is a way of streamlining that, or giving artists better tools in order to specify kind of material definitions, look dev, and all that stuff, surely this can only be a good thing for the future. Focus on the creativity, I suspect. But one take, personal take, I suppose.
We'll see what happens in real time.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't like waiting for renders. I'm going back to the beginning of my career, remembering week-long renders coming back off a whole farm of compute. And that caused real problems in sweat on my producer's face. It was
or setting renders off with the wrong camera, and you just get like 1,000 frames of black. That's
right.
Done that before. So
me too. More than once.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff there, and the upshot is AI is just another tool. It's going to support what we do as artists, I think, hopefully. So who knows? Let's talk again in a year. See if I was right or wrong.
Well, I would love to. If you'll come back, I would love to. I'd love to have you back.
If this was interesting, I'd come back again. Love to.
Sure.
See you guys doing a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to come and be a part of this.
Thanks to everyone for listening as well. I hope this was useful. That's the main. It's difficult to know.
Some thumbs up in the chat.
Excellent. Good. Brilliant.
Definitely appreciate it, and I'd definitely love to have you back. And sorry if we didn't get to all the questions, but Andy, as we wrap, is there anything else that you would like people to know about you, follow you on, or anything you'd like to share?
I lurk a lot on X. If anyone's interested, I don't do so much on other social channels. I do some observations on sort of AI tooling at the moment. There's some bits and pieces. Anyone wants to follow me there, say hello, or just ping me on LinkedIn if you've got any questions for the future. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So on X, I'm Andy Mac 3D. If anyone's interested, I do some demo things on there occasionally, or some of the things I've been working on, looking at tooling around AI and general kind of short films and things, really. So, but love to hear from you if you've got any thoughts. It'd be great.
Connect with Andy on LinkedIn and X. And again, thank you so much, Andy. I a lot to thank you for, but very particularly today, and also helping me at the start of my career again.
It's always a pleasure, Ed. You were the best one of that year by a long way.
Oh, thank you.
Brilliant. Well, glad to see you done so well. Amazing.
Still going, and it's going to be excuse me. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens next. We're right there with you, and appreciate the work you guys are doing at CineSight in exploring this and figuring out what its edges are. Looking forward to seeing what you do.
Great stuff. Yeah, watch this space. Got some interesting things ahead. Be good.
Thanks to everybody who was listening today. We appreciate you being here and asking questions. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with our next podcast guest, who I believe is Scott Ross, who started Digital Domain and ran ILM for a while. So tune in for that episode. And we have an CG Pro show next week. Another couple of announcements. CG Pro show next week, and another open day coming up in a few weeks' time as well. So stay tuned, sign up for our newsletter, and you'll hear all about those. Thanks all. Take care.